Ed Morello.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. To ask the Minister whether he will make a statement on the adequacy of Jhoots as a pharmacy provider.
Minister Stevenson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I congratulate the Honourable Member for West Dorset for securing this important urgent question. Pharmacies play a vital role in our healthcare system. They are at the heart of our high streets and the cornerstone of communities up and down the country. That's why this government has given pharmacies a funding boost of almost £500 million this year, more than any other area of the NHS, and the biggest uplift in years. Indeed, we've provided a 19% uplift over the two-year period. The vast majority of pharmacies provide excellent care to their patients, but unfortunately there are some that fall short of the standards that we expect. And sadly, the services provided by Jhoots are falling well below the mark. Honourable members will know that several integrated care boards have been deploying contract management actions against Jhoots, initially in the form of breach notices. Integrated care boards enforce the NHS terms of service on pharmacies for things like their opening hours, and the General Pharmaceutical Council regulates pharmacy premises and pharmacy professionals. Both integrated care boards and the General Pharmaceutical Council have powers to address problems in pharmacies, and they are actively using those powers, including in relation to stores that are part of Jhoots. I have written to the Honourable Gentleman about this case, and as he will understand, it is difficult for me to go into the specific details about one specific pharmacy chain, at least in terms of the specifics of the measures that we're taking. But what I can tell him is that where there are problems with access to medicines, integrated care boards are supporting affected patients in the short term. For example, by allowing local dispensing doctors to provide dispensing services to affected patients. Where pharmacy stores regularly breach their terms of service, integrated care boards can give them notice that they are being removed from the pharmaceutical list. This power applies to any and all pharmacies, including Jhoots, of course. This means they will no longer be able to provide NHS services. Such notices can be appealed, so it does take some time to work through the system. I'd like to stress to honourable members that pharmacies are private businesses and must be responsible business owners. Whilst we can regulate what pharmacies should and should not do as part of their NHS terms of service, it is not possible to prevent pharmacies from, for example, not paying their staff. In conclusion, if pharmacies breach their terms of service, for example by not being open when they should be, or where there are patient safety concerns, we take action. The General Pharmaceutical Council is taking regulatory action. Integrated care boards are taking regulatory action and are supporting patients with access to medicines where necessary. This is aimed at improving the pharmacy's behaviour, but can ultimately lead to pharmacies being forced to close their business. I have also asked my officials to explore whether we can strengthen the regulatory framework to be able to deal more quickly with pharmacies that do not play by the rules, and my officials are working on this as a matter of urgency. My office is setting up a meeting as well with the Honourable Gentleman to discuss this further, and I will keep the House updated in the usual way. Thank you.
Edward Moreno.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd be grateful if you could pass my thanks to the Speaker for granting this urgent question. I thank the Minister for his response. The collapse of service provision in some places, the constant closure in others, and general governance at Jhoots Pharmacy, which operates 150 branches across England, does demand immediate ministerial intervention. In West Dorset, Jhoots branches in Lyme Regis and Bridport have closed for months, leaving thousands without access to essential medication and placing huge strain on overstretched neighbouring pharmacies. Jhoots staff have gone months without pay, despite payslips being issued, tax deductions made and pension contributions not deposited. I've been contacted only this morning by staff who have not been paid for the third month. Many are unable to buy food, pay rent, and are relying on food banks and the amazing communities that have stepped up to support them. There have been reports of staff recruited by Jhoots under skilled workers visas being left without income or resource. I've also been made aware of deeply troubling reports of controlled drugs being removed without proper documentation or process, which, if proven true, may constitute a breach of the Misuse of Drugs Act. I've raised my concerns with the General Pharmaceutical Council, HMRC, NHSBA, the ICB and Minister Kinnock, who I thank for his response. And while I understand that processes must be followed, this situation requires immediate action. Jhoots staff are not being paid. People across the country do not have access to vital medicine. Can the Minister please confirm what steps are being taken to assure that all Jhoots staff are paid without delay? What discussions have taken place with the NHSBA, the General Pharmaceutical Council and other regulators about Jhoots business practices? And finally, will the Government commit to urgently reviewing Jhoots' suitability as an NHS pharmacy provider, outline what safeguards will be introduced to prevent this from happening again, and review the pharmacy funding model?
Yeah. Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his words, and I agree with absolutely everything he's just said. It is completely and utterly unacceptable if a business such as Jhoots is not paying its staff. If indeed there are these reports that controlled drugs are not being handled properly, I would strongly recommend that any mishandling of drugs be reported to the General Pharmaceutical Council, who regulate pharmacy professionals and premises, so that appropriate action can be taken. Regarding his question on paying staff, pharmacy staff are vitally important parts of our NHS in terms of the NHS part of what pharmacy does. They provide vital services to our communities and should be paid according to their contracts. Any failure to do so is completely unacceptable. Of course, pharmacy staff are not employed by the NHS, but by those businesses that they work for. Therefore, any dispute between staff and a pharmacy business should be raised with the Advisory, Conciliation and Arbitration Service, ACAS. But I am also in touch with the PDA, the Pharmacy Defence Association, and I know they're doing important work in terms of representing their members, and I will be meeting soon with them as well. But we have, of course, responsibility for the NHS part of the work, but it is up to individual businesses to ensure that their employees are treated fairly. In terms of the review of suitability to operate, as he rightly points out, we are looking at this now across the board in terms of what is the role of the General Pharmaceutical Council, what role is what's taking place in terms of ICBs taking contract action, where there is no sign of improvement and the pharmacies continue to be in breach. The next escalation for that is that they be struck off the pharmaceutical register. That takes some time because certain pharmacies, I'm not going to name names, but I'm sure the honourable gentleman can imagine who, are trying every single thing they can to appeal, to push back, to stop some of the actions that we're seeking to take. That is elongating the time that this all takes. But I want to be clear that if there is clear breach and that action is not taken to remedy that breach, then pharmacies will be struck off the pharmaceutical register.
Very own pharmacist, Shadiq Al-Hassan.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and as a pharmacist for nearly 20 years and MP of North Somerset, I have the dubious pleasure of having 2 Jhoots pharmacies in the town of Portishead in my constituency. Now, I can't say operating because they shuttered their doors, with reports of them not having paid their bills, not having paid their rent, not having paid their staff. Now, as a pharmacist, I know that this affects the perception and view of community pharmacy up and down the country. Can I ask the Minister what efforts he and the department are planning to mean that bad actors in the pharmacy space, such as, in my opinion, Jhoots seem to be obviously one, are going to be dealt with more quickly and more effectively under new legislation?
It should not be statements. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank my honourable friend, and I pay tribute to his direct professional expertise and experience as a pharmacist. He is right to point to the fact that the regulatory framework is clearly not as strong as it needs to be. The behaviour, I've spoken with officials in my department who've worked in the pharmacy sector for many, many years. They haven't seen anything like this before. It is quite unprecedented, but nevertheless, I think what it is doing is shining a light on the fact that we don't have a strong enough regulatory framework. We need to look at the way that business owners are regulated. There is strong regulation in terms of pharmacists and pharmacy staff, technicians, etc., but business owners are not being regulated as strongly as they could and should be. He's right that speed is also very important. That's why we need to look at ways of fast-tracking particular cases where there is clear breach, because sometimes the appeal process can be very slow indeed. We are looking at all of this in the round, and I have commissioned urgent advice from my officials to see how we can beef up the regulatory framework.
Shadow Minister Dr. Luke Evans.
The National Pharmacy Association Chief Executive Henry Gregg only this weekend said he's concerned that reports of Jhoots pharmacy branches across England failing patients risks damaging community pharmacy's reputation and could imperil its ability to secure a good 2026-27 funding settlement. Across the country, communities have been left without functioning pharmacies. Doors locked without notice, patients arriving to find no pharmacist, no prescriptions, no stock. Staff unpaid, staff threatened with being sacked. Jhoots Pharmacy faces allegations of not paying wages, repossessed premises, and serious regulatory breaches. The General Pharmaceutical Council has already intervened several times, yet for many patients, it's too late. They simply can't get their medicines. This is not an isolated business failure. It exposes a deeper fragility in the community pharmacy network, one that local people depend on for basics and often life-saving care. So I have four questions for the Minister. Number one, when was the NHS England first made aware of these closures? And has the Minister met with the Jhoots leadership? If not, why not? And if he did, what was the outcome? Number two, has the department assessed how many people have been left without local pharmacy access as the result of Jhoots' actions? And what is the Minister doing to remedy this, considering it's across the country? He mentioned ICBs, but there are several involved. Number three, what mechanisms exist to ensure continuity of care when a contractor collapses or walks away? Again, he mentioned ICBs, but is there a national contingency plan? And finally, will the government now review whether the current model, with chains and expanding rapidly through acquisition and debt, is fit to safeguard community pharmacy in the long term? And linked to this, can the Minister definitively confirm the funding settlement is not compromised? The 10-year NHS plan states it wants to move more care into the community, yet it's completely missing a delivery chapter on how to achieve it. At the same time, we have issues like Jhoots. So I hope the Minister will be taking steps to investigate this issue in its entirety, taking actions to safeguard against the type of incident happening again, and spelling out the delivery aspect of the 10-year plan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Shadow Minister for his questions. In terms of first awareness of what was happening with Jhoots, he will know that they entered the market through the purchase of a number of Lloyd's pharmacies that were no longer a going concern, and that took place in 2023. So in terms of the question about the due diligence on Jhoots as an operator, that's probably a question he should be asking one of my predecessors from his party that were in power at the time. Since they purchased, they have expanded rapidly, and that has been where we've seen then the question marks around their ability to operate and serious downgrading of services. I have not met with the management of Jhoots. We are looking at a whole range of legal and regulatory enforcement procedures, and the decision we have therefore taken is that it is better not to interfere in any way in those processes, but I am certainly monitoring that very closely, and if we have legal advice that suggests such a meeting would be a good idea, then I'm of course open to that idea, but the current legal position, the advice we've received is that it would not be appropriate at this time. In terms of local pharmacy access, integrated care boards are of course have a statutory responsibility to ensure adequate pharmacy provision. So some ICBs, for example, have allowed dispensing GP practices to provide dispensing services to affected patients, whilst others have worked with local GP practices to advise patients to nominate alternative nearby pharmacies for their prescriptions. We've looked at the impact geographically in terms of where Jhoots is placed, and in most cases our view is that there is an alternative pharmacy provision within striking distance, but there are I think 4 or 5 areas of the country where that's not the case, including the honourable gentleman who secured this urgent question in his constituency. I'm very conscious of that, and then extra provision needs to be made through the ICBs and through GPs to ensure, perhaps it might be through distance selling or other means, to ensure that patients are getting access to their pharmaceutical needs. He asks about continuity of care and national contingency. This is a very challenging situation because, as I mentioned in my remarks, and as officials have said, we haven't seen this level of decline in service so rapidly, and so we are working at pace to strengthen the regulatory framework and looking at contingency plans. I don't see any reason why the overall funding settlement for pharmacy should be undermined, and we will continue to protect community pharmacy as a crucially important part of our NHS.
Select Committee Member Paulette Hamilton.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to thank the Minister for his response. The role of community pharmacies, like a pharmacy in my area called Lodge Pharmacy in Perry Common, is absolutely vital. And this is why, but also I'd like to, I've lost track, but community pharmacies offer an excellent service, and this is why I'm concerned with places like Jhoots Pharmacy closing and folding, or maybe folding. The question I'd like to ask, coming up to the winter months, I have been passionate about winter measures. How are we going to ensure that our pharmacies are going to be able to offer the winter vaccines that are needed this year if we lose large chains like Jhoots Pharmacy? Sorry about that.
Yeah. Right, Minister.
I thank my honourable friend and pay tribute to her work on the Select Committee. NHS England is assessing the situation and preparing contingency plans in case Jhoots does become insolvent. Such plans involve working with other local pharmacies and dispensing GP practices to ensure that patients continue to have access to medicines. Continuity of care, as she rightly points out, has to be at the heart of our response to this, and we are working at pace to ensure that continuity of care is protected.
Select Committee, Liberal Democrat spokesperson Helen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I first thank my honourable friend, the member for West Dorset, for raising this appalling issue. Pharmacies are at the heart of our communities, and they are relied upon by millions, and they're under increasing pressure right across the country, where we're seeing irregular opening hours and unforecast closures. Families living in communities that rely on Jhoots pharmacies, like those in the constituency of my honourable friend, and many other parts of the country, will be deeply concerned that they and their loved ones are about to be left without medicines potentially that they desperately need, while their staff have been placed in an intolerable situation. The National Pharmacy Association Chief Executive has said, as we've heard, that Jhoots risks damaging the reputation of community pharmacies. The government urgently needs to grip this issue and ensure that patients and the staff of these pharmacies are not being let down. So will the Minister and the Secretary of State agree to meet with all the members in this place whose communities are being affected by potential closures? Will he update the House at the earliest opportunity as to what steps he's taking to stabilise the crisis in community pharmacy across the country? And is he confident that ICBs, who are distracted by 50% cuts to their budgets, a top-down reorganisation, that they have the capacity to deal with this urgent situation as they head into planning for the next winter crisis?
I thank her for those questions. I would certainly be happy to meet with honourable members who have Jhoots in their constituency and are affected by this. I will absolutely update the House. We are taking action on looking at strengthening the regulation, but there is also some constraints on what I can say, because so much of this is now going through legal process. As I say, there is pushback. we don't want to do anything to jeopardise the legal action that we are taking through the appeal process. So I'll have to be relatively circumspect in what I say, but I'm happy to have those discussions and to update the House. I am confident that ICBs can take this forward. As I said, in most cases across the country, based on our assessment, there is a pharmacy within striking distance of a Jhoots. But certainly in those areas where there isn't, that may require particular follow-up action, and my officials and I will be following up with those ICBs to ensure that the appropriate action is being taken.
Melanie On.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. 5 members of Jhoots staff have been to see me from the Laceby Road pharmacy. They've been going into work but haven't been paid since July. It is absolutely appalling. Can the Minister set out what pressure he and the department can bring to bear on this chain, which has now, unfortunately, closed its doors for good?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. I agree with absolutely every word of what she's just said. It is completely unacceptable that people are coming into work, doing an honest day's work, and not receiving an honest day's pay for that work. Unfortunately, there's a limit to what we can do because pharmacies are private businesses and each employer is required to fulfil their legal obligations in terms of paying their staff. I would recommend that the members of staff that she mentions contact ACAS, and they should also, if they're not already in touch with the PDA, their trade union, if they are members of that union, I would strongly recommend that joining a trade union and seeking legal advice from a trade union is a vitally important part of what trade unions do. They need to take action on this and to force Jhoots to do the right thing.
Simon Hall.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to thank my friend and neighbour for West Dorset for introducing this urgent question. I have exactly the same problem as he and the Honourable Member for North Somerset, but in Shaftesbury, in my constituency. I want to thank the staff of Boots who are picking up such a huge amount of slack because the Jhoots isn't there. There's a danger to the one member of staff who is on duty because there are prescribed drugs on the premises and she's the only person there, and I do worry for her safety. I wonder what additional support the department can give to those existing providers like Boots who are picking up the slack, particularly during the winter peak with regards to advice to patients and also administering vaccines. This is a clear breach of contract, but I'm told by our ICB it doesn't fall within contract law. The regulations are mute on this point because the circumstances that Jhoots find itself in was never envisaged when the regulations were written. That's the problem which the Minister has identified. There does seem to be some timidity amongst officials and others with regards to the overhanging threat of a judicial review were the government to act in extremis to introduce some urgency to it. I would urge the Minister to take that risk on behalf of all of our constituents, and I certainly welcome and look forward to his offer to the suggestion of the Honourable Lady from North Shropshire that all members of Parliament with constituents affected by this dire problem will be involved in meetings so that we can provide timely advice and update and support to our constituents who are, of course, rightly worried.
Minister.
I thank him for his question, and I pay tribute to the employees in the Boots, which is close by the Jhoots, that is not providing the service that's required, and we really do appreciate that. I can assure him that absolutely nothing is off the table. He has rightly identified the problem, which is that the regulatory framework is strong on pharmacists, strong on pharmacist premises, strong on pharmacy staff, but it seems that there is something of a gap when it comes to regulating pharmacy business owners. That is a gap that has been identified. I have asked I've commissioned my officials to work on that at pace, and I would happily keep him updated on that work.
Noshaba Khan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for the context he's provided and the responses he has provided so far. Jhoots in my constituency of Gillingham and Rainham have provided incredibly poor service, not paying staff, not dispensing vital medicine, and often not opening on time. However, any replacement pharmacy or provider is not able to come in because at the moment the pharmaceutical needs assessment locally suggests that the provision is functioning. Will the Minister consider a review of the criteria surrounding P&As so that not only do they list those pharmacies that are available, but also look at failures such as the ones that we are seeing with Jhoots and are able to recognise that so other providers can take their place if needs be?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, and she's also put her finger on an issue within all of this, which is if you're looking to bring in other pharmacies to open up to replace Jhoots or indeed to take over a Jhoots store, you can't do that in the latter case until such time as there is an insolvency and that business is no longer a going concern. And if you want to bring in, there is a process for opening new pharmacies as set out in legislation. Potential new pharmacy contractors can apply to open in the area and evidence how a new pharmacy can provide benefits for patients. It is, however, a challenge for new contractors to make such a case if a Jhoots pharmacy is still listed as open and providing services in the area. So it's something of a catch-22 situation. We first of all have to resolve the issue with Jhoots, take the necessary action, and then we see where we are in terms of potential gaps in the market.
Select Committee Chair Leila Moran.
Deputy Speaker, this case of Jhoots is clearly hugely unfortunate given the incredible work that community pharmacies do up and down the country for our constituents. I'm pleased to hear the Minister say that this case won't negatively affect the funding settlement, but we also know this is in the backdrop of a very precarious sector where actors who want to do good by our communities, who want to do a high-quality job, often find they simply can't make ends meet at the end of the day, and bad actors find a way to move in. When the committee looked last at this, workforce was a key plank to why this sector was not sustainable. What update can the Minister give us on the inclusion of pharmacists in the workforce plan?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady and pay tribute to her work as Chair of the Select Committee. I'm very proud of the fact that we delivered a £500 million uplift to pharmacy, 19% across the two-year period. That is the highest uplift of any sector, not just of my portfolio, but of the entire NHS. I'm also very proud of the fact that we're taking forward hub and spoke legislation to enable pharmacists and pharmacy technicians to operate at the top of their licence. And we have also just the day before yesterday signed off on an SI for improving the ability of technicians on dispensing and to do more in that area as well. So we're looking to empower the workforce, enable them to operate at the top of the licence, and that is a fundamental part of the shift from hospital to community that is at the heart of our 10-year plan.
Cat Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Jhoots Pharmacy moved into the village of Knott End in 2023, and it wasn't long before constituents were getting in touch with me explaining that they couldn't access their prescriptions because the pharmacies were closed and it was very unreliable. However, we do have a very good Overwire Medical Centre which has dispensing rights. However, they are restrained by the 1 mile rule, which means they can't dispense prescriptions within 1 mile of where a pharmacy is, regardless of whether or not it's open or closed. So I feel like we're in a catch-22 situation here. What help can the Minister give my constituents to ensure that those constituents who are within the 1 mile of the Jhoots pharmacy that's never open can access their prescriptions from the dispensing Overwire medical practice?
Minister.
I thank her for that question. She has absolutely rightly put her finger on the catch-22 situation in which we find ourselves. It is patently absurd that a pharmacy that isn't operating, as she just described it, the Jhoots isn't operating, is blocking the ability of others to step in and fill the gap. That is something we have to resolve. It's part of the work that I've commissioned urgently. We've clearly got gaps in the regulatory framework. This is an unprecedented situation. We're working at pace to address it, but she's absolutely rightly put her finger on the catch-22 that needs to be resolved. We need to move one piece out of the way so that we can deal adequately with this situation.
Bradley Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, the way Jhoots is treating its workforce and the community is frankly appalling, suppliers as well, and they're failing communities who desperately rely on them. The government is planning to introduce a health bill at some point in the coming months that will see the abolition of NHS England. Can the Minister update the House on when that bill will come forwards and what provision it will contain within it to strengthen accountability for delivery of community pharmacy provision?
Minister.
I thank him. I know that my colleague, the Minister of State for Health, is working hard on the drafting process for that bill. I can't give him the exact date of its introduction, but I'd be very happy to write to him with confirmation of the expected introduction date.
Jonathan Davies.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm very pleased this question has been tabled today because I've written to the Minister about this company, and I'm also very grateful to my honourable friend from North Somerset who's given me advice in this matter. I'm pleased the Government is taking regulatory action in respect of the quality, safety and availability of the service, but I was horrified to hear that several of my constituents working for this company have gone unpaid for several weeks. So please could I ask him to reach out to the relevant Minister within the Department for Business and Trade just to see if there's anything else that we can do for those people, because it's just simply not right that they're out of pocket.
I thank my honourable friend for that. That's an excellent suggestion. I will do that. If there is clear evidence of breach of employment law, and we're hearing colleague after colleague saying that staff are not being paid, we absolutely need to look at that, and I will follow up on his suggestion.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've heard again this afternoon the line from the Minister that pharmacy staff are not employed by the NHS but by pharmacy businesses, and this is just a dispute between staff and the pharmacy business that should be raised in the first instance with ACAS. Holly Froggatt from Sidmouth has written to me as a former member of staff from Jhoots. She writes, staff have emailed them begging for their wages as they have empty bank accounts. In normal circumstances, the government likes to lean on pharmacies to take the pressure off GPs with such schemes as Pharmacy First. So how can the Minister simply wash his hands of this situation when staff have gone 3 months without pay?
Minister.
Well, I thank him for that. I don't think that's an accurate characterisation of what I'm saying. I am saying that we are taking action against Jhoots from the regulatory point of view, and there is clearly a very glaring issue around the payment of their staff. That needs to be taken forward through the industrial relations process, both through ACAS and through the PDA. We will absolutely give all the support we can to both of those in terms of ensuring that Jhoots is held to account.
Lizzie Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents in Sedbergh, which is a rural market town, have also suffered greatly from the terrible pharmacy provision from Jhoots. You know, medicines unavailable, often being closed, staff and locum pharmacists going unpaid, yet payslips being issued, so it's very hard for them to claim benefits. I've written to the Minister, as he knows, I've met with the ICB, and doctors and neighbouring pharmacists, I mean, I say neighbouring, this is Westmoreland, so that's a 40-minute drive away to the neighbouring pharmacists, have stepped in to help, and of course, as has the parish council. So the Minister outlined for me what action he's taking nationally to force Jhoots to provide a better service for my constituents.
Minister.
I thank her for that, and we are actively working with integrated care boards, with NHS England, with the GPC, the General Pharmaceutical Council, and indeed trade unions to ensure that all of these issues are being taken forward and given the urgency that they require. Sadly, as I have pointed out, the regulatory framework is not adequate. It is very focused on pharmacists and pharmacy premises, and inadequately and insufficiently focused on business owners. That is clearly something that must be addressed as a matter of urgency, and we are working on it at pace.
Mike Wood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The failure of Jhoots is putting unsustainable pressure on other alternative pharmacies around Kingswinford and South Staffordshire. But talks haven't even begun on pharmacy funding beyond March of next year. So given the urgent situation with Jhoots, will the Minister review the timescale for those talks so that our pharmacies that are having to pick up this extra work can have some certainty about future funding?
Minister.
I thank him for that question. This is absolutely urgent, as he rightly says. I have commissioned officials to work on this matter at pace. We clearly see that this is a matter of national significance, just simply by the number of colleagues in the chamber today talking about this issue. So I can absolutely give him that assurance, and I'd be happy to update him once I've got a better sense of exactly the time frame, the deadlines, and we will be insisting that things happen as a matter of urgency.
James Naish.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I met with the Singh family, which runs 2 pharmacies in my Rushcliffe constituency over recess, and they were clear with me that despite improved funding, they are still struggling with overly complex funding formulas, delayed payments, high energy prices and drug shortages, among other challenges. However, the positive initiatives of Pharmacy First and the Independent Prescribing Pathfinder programme offer a ray of hope. So I wondered if the Minister could commit to continuing to invest time and energy in expanding those programmes and maybe meet with my pharmacies from Rushcliffe to discuss them further.
Minister.
I thank him. We remain absolutely committed to the independent prescribing service, and we are working on the plans and strategy to make that a reality. Pharmacy First, we continue to support. Sadly, take-up on Pharmacy First has not been as good as we would have liked it to be. I think the way in which it was structured and incentivised has not enabled it to realise its full potential, and we are working on that as well. Because I think a number of errors were taken by made by the previous government, which didn't set Pharmacy First up to succeed to the extent that it should have been.
Like.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Jhoots pharmacies reveal the severe financial strain facing community pharmacies. The towns of Glastonbury and Bruton are home to fantastic independent pharmacies, continuing to serve their communities despite more than half of pharmacy owners losing money last year. So how will the government ensure that the regulatory framework is robust so that community pharmacy services in rural areas can remain resilient and accessible?
Minister.
I thank her, and she's absolutely right. This is about making the regulatory framework more robust. As I've pointed out, it is robust on pharmacists, on technicians and on pharmacy premises. It is simply not strong enough when it comes to pharmacy business owners, and this unprecedented case of Jhoots is throwing that into sharp relief. That is what we are working on at pace, and I'd be very happy to update her once we've got some clear progress on what the plan and strategy is to ensure that we are beefing up the regulatory framework to ensure that this kind of thing can never happen again.
Josh Dean.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I met last week with staff from Jhoots Pharmacy in Thorley and was shocked when they told me that they'd been unpaid for months but still working, with some struggling with their mortgages or unable to afford food for their children's school lunches. But their concern was for their residents, many elderly and vulnerable, who've been left without essential medication because of stock issues and unexpected closures. These are good, decent people who want to provide a community service for our residents. Absolutely. So can the Minister assure my constituents directly that the Department will look at all options possible and that they will work across government where relevant to ensure that the situation allowed this to become a problem and to address the specific situation affecting my constituents now will be addressed?
I thank him, and I pay tribute to his constituents who are clearly going through an extremely difficult and challenging time. I would strongly recommend that they contact ACAS and also the PDA or another trade union if they happen to be a member of another trade union. I think the key point he's made is around how we ensure that this doesn't happen again. The GPHC, the General Pharmaceutical Council, is taking enforcement action against individual pharmacies, and we have to wait for the outcome of those actions. Some of those are going through appeal processes. I think as soon as one of those actions has concluded, that will greatly facilitate and catalyse the process for going after any pharmacy that is not delivering to the service standards that we would expect.
James Wilde.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Staff and patients at Jhoots Pharmacy in Southwarton in North West Norfolk have been let down, going months without pay, no communication from management or stock, and the pharmacist left after non-payment. And when I raised the issues with the company, they simply refused to respond. The Minister has referred to regulatory changes in the future. But given this pattern is repeated across the country, what urgent steps is the Minister taking to work with ICBs collectively to ensure that staff get the money that they're owed, that services that have been commissioned are delivered, and will he not rule out taking action against individual directors?
Minister.
I thank him for that, and as I say, we are in constant dialogue with ICBs, with the GPC, and we need to, I absolutely get it, we need to speed it up. It needs to be faster, needs to be more urgent. I am absolutely clear about that, and we are taking this forward as a matter of priority. In terms of taking action against individual directors, nothing is off the table. But as I say, the regulatory framework as things stand doesn't facilitate that. So we've got to look at other options, but there are views in the GPC which suggest perhaps that there are some ways of looking at interpreting regulations and legislation that could potentially facilitate more immediate action. So that is on the menu of actions that we're looking at.
Steph Aquaro.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For almost 2 years now, the people of Sheringham have been suffering from completely unacceptable service from our local branch of Jhoots. Shortages of drugs, shortages of pharmacists, issues with paying staff and a litany of other issues have caused chaos, including one resident sent by NHS 111 to secure emergency antibiotics, only to find themselves standing in the rain outside a closed pharmacy, fearful they would end up in A&E. Can the Minister tell people in Sheringham and the surrounding villages what protection there'll be for services if Jhoots are no longer seen fit to provide them, how taxpayers' money is being protected from being lost here, but most importantly, how on earth was it allowed to get this bad in the first place?
Minister.
I thank him for that question. In terms of the replacement for Jhoots services, that is where we're in this catch-22 situation, because until they have been moved, a pharmacy that's not providing a service, let's say, has been moved out of the way, it's not possible to move in and replace that service with another. So the first step in all of this is to take action against those pharmacies that are not delivering to requisite service standards. As soon as we can get that process moving, we can start to commission and bring in alternative providers. I share his frustration, I share the impatience of his constituents, and I can assure him that we're taking urgent action on all of these issues.
Final question, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for strong answers and his, to restore confidence as well. Will the Minister acknowledge that pressure on the NHS, especially coming into the winter months, means that pharmacies will be playing a bigger role in providing basic help and advice, and that being unable to rely on a pharmacy cannot be sustained? And can the Minister outline, please, the professional standards that are expected of pharmaceutical chains throughout the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and how these private companies can be held to their public obligations? Thank you.
Minister.
I thank him, and I agree absolutely that the vital role that community pharmacy plays now and going into the future, and we want that role to continue and to be strengthened and indeed expanded. If you look at our 10-year plan, the shift from hospital to community, well, community pharmacy at the heart of that, but also the shift from sickness to prevention, the vital work that community pharmacy plays in terms of delivering vaccines and a whole range of other services that really will support the prevention agenda. So community pharmacy is at the heart of our plan. The standards are as set out by the General Pharmaceutical Council. They are robust standards. It requires a certain level of service to be provided, certain levels of expertise and experience. That is all very robustly regulated. What we clearly now need to do is upgrade the way that we regulate pharmacy business owners, and that is something that my officials and I are working on as a matter of urgency.
That concludes the urgent question on Jhoots Pharmacy. I'll give the front benches a few moments to shuffle over, and we will start our first statement.